where I get to ask loads of questions, be curious, be open-minded with my guests. So my guest today, I've got the first part, Kim, that's fine. Kleidon? Are we
Yes.
good? Ah, amazing. I am getting so much better. When I first started, I was like, oh, I'm not sure I'm going to even attempt it. So I'm getting a bit braver every time. So, Kim, you've probably heard my opening monologue. It's always the same. I never introduce my guests purely because I think I would do a very, very bad job of it. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a few, well, take as long as you want, just to introduce yourself, any highs, lows, anything in between, any context that you think would be important for people to know a bit more about you, and then we just dive into the conversation.
I think the most important thing about me is that I'm a mother and a grandmother, a daughter, a sister, and a friend. I have lived 58 years of life to date and currently staring down the barrel of my 59th year on this planet. As someone who was literally born chief storyteller, as you see my little title there, my birth name literally translates to chief storyteller. So I was born Kim Postle, and anyone in England may recognise the name Postle, P-O-S-T-L-E, because my great-great-grandfather came out from England with his wife, girlfriend. They fled. She was the cook's daughter, evidently, and it was frowned upon. But anyway, they came to Australia to make a life for themselves. So we have generations of the Postles here now. And yeah, I've been in media for 35 years. So radio, television, print, photography, events, all that sort of stuff. And last year, I decided to take everything into my own hands again and be autonomous. So I'm now at that stage where I'd like to share all my knowledge, experience, and wisdom with people who are interested in connecting with their audience through storytelling. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Amazing. So I want to throw a compliment your way first of all before we kind of dive in, because I don't know if it's the storytelling part of you, but you really stuck in my mind after we spoke last time, and I think normally we just I say a half an hour conversation, but I think we spoke for a lot longer, and I just got this genuine warmth about speaking with you. I think we spoke about lots of different things. We spoke about kids. You kind of gave me a little insight into maybe your earlier life and the fact that you've done quite a lot quite early on in your life, and I think we can dig into that. But I think I don't know if it's part of that storytelling that sort of helped me connect with you, or just who you are as a person. So I was a bit curious to have you always been that way? Have you just always been open, or you've kind of evolved into that storytelling way of being? How did it evolve for you?
As far as I can remember, I've always been curious. I've always been fearless in relation to meeting people, talking to anyone. I've never considered anyone a stranger, just another human being. And I suppose I've got my mother to thank for that. She was quite the communicator, very friendly, very open. We had a very open communication policy in our house growing up. We were encouraged to more or less speak our minds. I mean, not to the point where if we were rude or didn't show respect to our parents, but we were encouraged to have conversations. And, we were often invited to share our day and talk to mum and dad about things. They always talked about business in front of us, what was going on with their business. And we basically spent most of our time after school at their fuel business. So I grew up from a very young age serving at the counter, answering telephones, and just generally meeting people and, yeah, being very open and telling them whatever they wanted to know, probably to a fault, because people don't want to know everything about you. But yeah, I've been an open book most of my life.
But you have brothers and sisters?
Just one brother, he's younger by about 17 months. But yeah, we were raised as two children. I was born 67, he was born 68. And Yeah, we basically ran amok in a small town called Gladstone, which is a regional area of central Queensland in Australia, and it was quite the place to be growing up, I might add. It wasn't like being in a city. It was in a boom when my parents moved there and we were born. So there was a lot of industry going on. My father was employed by one of the biggest companies in that town. My parents had both worked for the Shell company in Brisbane. And so my mum in the office, and I'm not even sure what my dad was doing, but that was where they sort of met. And later on, they were offered the Shell distribution depot, which was serving the boats, the planes. We had Bowsers, and so we'd have companies that had accounts, and they'd all bring their fleets in to fuel up. So it was a very busy place to be, and I learnt to drive. By the time I was 9, I could drive a car. That sort of stuff.
Was that under any sort of supervision, or it was just through necessity? What's the deal with that?
Well, my dad loved to put me on his lap. And from a very young age, while I could fit between his lap and the steering wheel, he taught me how to steer. And it was a column shift utility from work. And so he taught me how to change gears, and he'd depress the clutch because my feet couldn't reach. But by the time I was 9, I could actually reach the clutch, 9, 10. And yeah, so I already knew how to drive the car. It was just working out the clutch and the brake and the 3 pedals. And so after school, I was allowed to drive the utility up and down the footpath because it wasn't a very highly trafficked area at the time. It was a relatively new industrial area for Gladstone in the 70s. So yeah, it was great to have that sort of freedom. I had a horse and I went to pony club. So I was basically driving anything I wanted and riding whatever I liked and just getting around, because that was how it was in the 70s. It wasn't like it is today.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because there seems, just in what you've told me, there was a lot of freedom in your life. There was a lot of not just freedom to do things, but freedom to say things, that to show up and tell stories. But you also obviously came into contact with many different people, like you say, or this fuel merchant, where you've got people coming in telling stories of probably have come from different places around the world. So I'm wondering, are you a product of your upbringing, or how much of that was already in you? And the reason I asked about your brother, is he similar or dissimilar to you in that way?
Well, he used to say to me, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. So Troy loves to embellish stories. So he's one of those beer swilling Australians who love to tell stories about the big fish they caught and things like that. But no, we come from very different places in that regard. I suppose the storytelling, yes, it came from all the people, and they were from all over the world. I mean, my dad worked in Bougainville in Papua New Guinea for a while. When, he had other businesses, there were businessmen from China and all over the world that would come. And because of our open door policy, Mum, she would, one day I remember she came home with this family. They'd broken down on the side of the road. They had a flat tire on their van, and they couldn't get it fixed for a couple of days because this company had to get the parts. And Mum had picked them up and taken them to where they had to get the repairs. They stayed with us for 2 weeks, and I'll never forget them. Her name was Fleur, and they had small children. And yeah, so Mum was like that. And Mum worked at a tourism information bureau as a volunteer. She did a lot of community work. She was in GLOS, which is the Gladstone Light Opera Society. And it was theatre. It was a whole range of storytelling. I mean, I was in ballet and speech and drama and piano, and culturally, exposed to so many different things because my parents worked. So, well, if you could keep the kids busy with someone else, teaching them something, that was really, really good. So the freedom came from autonomy, independence. By the time I was, 9, 10 years old, I was able to go home as well in afternoons and cook the meal for the family, because Mum and Dad would often work well into the evening, and I didn't like having dinner at 8 o'clock at night. I wanted a bit earlier. So, I was at boarding school by the time I was 12 years old in Brisbane, which was 600 kilometres away from my home, with nuns. So, yeah, it was definitely one of those childhoods where I was empowered, and I was raised to be very resilient, to be independent. I had the cooking skills. I looked after my brother, and I got us on our bus in the morning to go to school. At those early, stages and ages, we'd walk down the road, wait for the bus on the street corner, and off we'd go. And Mum and Dad would be, going about their day. So, yeah, boarding school 12, stayed there till 15. the rest is history. So, and I think it's great. I've always given my mum credit for the way she empowered me, especially as the eldest child, as a girl. She always told me that women could do anything, you know, anything a man could do, women can do. And she demonstrated that. I mean, when we had tradespeople come to the house, she would always be their TA. So she'd get in and she'd help them. And she showed me that we could concrete, that we could build, block walls and do gardening and whatever I wanted. Mum drove speedway. I mean, she was incredible. When she rode motorbikes, she drove trucks. Mum would get in and do anything. And yeah, so it was good having that type of role model, I suppose, growing up.
Yeah, something sort of pops up when you had this freedom or an autonomy, and I want to ask you this question. I'm a bit hesitant to ask it because it feels a bit wrong, but you know, your mum and dad were obviously busy doing things, running the business, etc., and then you had to go off. Did you feel loved and supported as a child?
To a degree, I think there was also a sense of distance, created through some of that as well. I suppose I thought that was normal. So as a child, you don't know much different, that you're not spending as much time with your parents as, say, someone else is. But by the time I got to boarding school, I recognized that there was a big difference between myself and some of the kids who were from, big properties out west, because the boarding school I was at was an Anglican or a Church of England school run by nuns, and there were kids mostly from Jericho and all the properties areas out west, Roma, so a big catchment from Western Queensland, and they were very connected and very close with their family, and so they missed them, and they would be calling, and at the end of the call they'd say, good night, Mum, I love you, I miss you, and good night to their brothers and sisters or whoever else was at home. And I'm like, what's this I love you, miss you thing? Like, I'd never heard those words, and I was 12 years old. And so I started saying it to my parents, and I'll never forget the silence at the end of the phone. It was just crickets. It was just this long pause. I'm like, love you. And they're like, they didn't know how to respond to that. You got to remember they were products of the 40s, post-war. Times were different. I never recall them saying that to each other, like holding hands, none of that. There was no PDAs. Yeah, so it was a different time, and it wasn't until I got older that I recognized there was something missing, and I had been, I'd been given all the opportunities, but not necessarily the hugs and the love, which is actually the reason the reason I wrote my first book was part of that. My first children's book, which is called Huggle, Snuggle, Cuddle. It's about how important touch and hugs particularly are, but it's written in rhyme about animals that hug their young, because I wanted to connect children with nature as well, and recognize that not just humans live a certain way, that a lot of animals do a lot of human things. So yeah, no, I missed out on the hugs and the I love yous, but I changed that as I got older. I created my own environment, and I'm a big hugger and a big I love you person, so I'll tell anybody I love them.
I am. So we've talked about parenting before, and I love you still bring with you this freedom and ability for people to explore themselves. So you've got kids and grandkids, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you, so I've often found what tends to happen is, as a child, if we were missing something as a child, when we then have children, we go 100% the other way, and we try to overcompensate. And just so I'll give a simple example. Just say that you were raised poor, you had no money, and you never got anything, etc. Then when we have kids, we tend to just lavish them in absolutely everything, and we go, uh, in my opinion, often too far just to overcompensate. But I think you've talked about your family, and it feels that you've found that balance. You have that you know you give them that freedom, and you haven't replaced freedom with just, okay, they've got to be with you all the time. You've just allowed that, and that's, I think sometimes, I think you have to be quite self-aware to do that. You can say, okay, this is the thing I love, this is maybe the thing that I kind of needed or I missed out on, and I'm not going to overcompensate, but I'm going to bring, like you just said, you've built your world in that way. And I think that's super healthy. So congratulations to be able to do that. And I think that idea of freedom is something I just want to spend a moment thinking about, because I think in the world that we live today, we overcompensate, or we're so scared that our kids are going to fall down, going to hurt themselves, and we rob them of a lot of experiences. Um, uh, and I think, again, we go too far. And I don't know if that's too much information, too connected, the scary stories that we hear about, kidnapping and everything like that. But I believe there's so much in that freedom and allowing kids to be who they are. I'll give you a prime example. Both of my girls they're young. The eldest is 7, and she's very good at gymnastics. The other one's very good, but obviously she's just a little bit behind. She's now 6. In the gymnastic environment, she is, you've got all the safety mats and everything like that. So you're fully free to do all those things, and if you fall down, you're okay. Yesterday, she wanted to do backflips without using her hand on my bed, and there is part of me that looks at that scenario and goes, the worst thing that can happen is you can snap your neck and something's going to go wrong. But I had to hold on to my projection of what could actually go on. I did share, just say, look, don't do it. Just, I'll be mindful of this. And so she did it last night. And again, she was super excited to come and do it. And I was like, I'm so glad, and I'm not saying I do this all the time, but I'm so glad I didn't stop her from doing that thing because of some insecurity I have, and the need to protect her, because that's really serving me and not serving her. And I think we go too far. We project onto our children almost too much and put too many boundaries. And I think sometimes that works and that makes us feel comfortable, but in the long run they'll probably do the thing itself, but just not when we're seeing stuff. So but you seem to just carry on that freedom. And was that a choice or just who you are? How did that work for you?
Remember, I think in the beginning I mentioned I have this fearless part of me that it's changed, that everything evolves. But I think that's what it's connected with. It's our own fears. And when you mentioned insecurity, that is a fear. It's we have filled, and I've spoken many times with a lot of people on my podcast, what we teach our children about this very subject. And a lot of people I've spoken with had a similar childhood to mine, even in the UK. I spoke with Mark Rowland last week or the week before, and he's an entrepreneur and he grew up in the UK, but he had the ability to be able to explore, and and he said it changed for his children. Like, he wouldn't let his children do what he did. However, he is more inclined to assist and support them in achieving those things, given that we now know so much about what happens in the world. And the fear for most parents is that they may be that person. I mean, because everything that happens in the world now is streamed on television, online, 24/7. So if a child goes missing or is abducted or worse, we all know about it. And all of a sudden there's a heightened sense of awareness. And I think that we do our children a disservice if we don't allow them to take risks at some level, even if it's something we manage. And I think when we were talking before, we arranged this interview, I mentioned one of my grandsons, Henry, and he is he's just a monkey. He just loves climbing. He's a risk taker. He was born that way. His older brother, Harry, very conservative, loves watching things spin, and you can see his mind working. But Henry, he's just a doer, and he doesn't think before he does, he just does. And so my daughter discouraged him from climbing trees when he was young. And so when I was with them and he wanted to climb a tree, there was a fear in him already. And so all I could do was support him to understand how he could safely, all hands and feet on, stable platforms, climb a tree. And when he got to the top and he freaked out about how am I going to get down now, I'm like, You just reverse. You do everything you just did in reverse. So where was that hand before it went up there, and where was that foot, and put him back down on the next branch. And so it's that building of skills and helping them feel empowered to take risks at stages and ages where they feel capable, and you're building confidence, because without that, what sort of future do we have as a species on this planet if we're growing a generation or raising a generation of children who are risk averse, facing the challenges we're leaving them? That is a big concern for me. So I think that, yeah, we do need to manage our own fears and be realistic about the risks at those age appropriate stages.
Yeah. And that idea about projecting is something, because um, at my age now, I think, oh, I couldn't necessarily, like you said, just about climbing a tree. You go, oh no, I couldn't do that. I get stuck, or I'm not just nimble enough. And we don't actually think about it consciously, how it is for them, because we're just projecting with all of the experience and all of the, I want to say wisdom, and I don't know it's always wisdom, but of our life experience. And you go, okay, but actually, the best time I've really connected with the kids is when I've actually taken my projection of the world and kind of getting rid of it and gone back and thought of myself as a child, and I've gone, yeah,
Yes,
that's really cool. Like,
that's the key.
like, and it's like even simple things like I've got two girls, and they were sort of pushing and shoving and not hitting necessarily, but sort of being a bit rough and tumble. And from my perspective, I was like, no, why are you doing that? But I remember that was such an amazing, that was a bonding thing with my brother. We would just do that. We weren't hurting each other. Yeah, occasionally it would end in some tears or whatever, but it was a way to experience what your body was like, what your capabilities were to move, to push, what it was felt like to get like a thump on the arm, or whatever. And so it's like, oh, don't look through the eyes of today, look through the eyes of when you were a kid. And then play enters my mind, and I'm like, yeah, like we should do that. And I think I've talked about this a little bit, and there's a conversation I'm going to have soon. But just play is just such a integral part of our life. And I think as adults, we let that go and we become a bit miserable. We become a bit like, oh no, this is the way. But I mean, I'm a bit older to have kids, but the best time I ever connect with my kids, and the best feeling that I get, is when I get to play with them. Like,
Mm.
just like, not trying to teach them, not trying to, install some wisdom, but play with them, because it's a fun place to be, and it just lights me up. And we get very serious about, okay,
Yeah,
this is what you've got to learn, this is what you got to do, you got all this. But in the grand scheme of things, like, you're only small for a period of time, and as long as you can keep that fun element, that play, curiosity, I just like, I would love them to do that. And we seem to live in a world where we want them to grow up. What's the career you want to do? Like
very
we've made them,
serious.
yeah, we've made them old before they've even been born sometimes. So how do you do it? You just show up as you are, or do you actively seek to do, like, sort of play with your, like, kids and grandkids? How did it work for you?
The best fun is to play as much as you can. I mean, it's funny when you were talking about your brother and you, and I remember my brother and I, there was a game we used to play in the 70s. It was Dead Arm, and you'd start punching each other in the top of the arm, and whoever, couldn't lift their arm was the loser. And I remember playing that with my husband 20 years ago in the kitchens. Because he grew up in the 70s as well. So he knew what the game was all about. So I think you need to keep that spirit of fun and that energy alive. But it's so easy to do around children because they're up for it. They are still in that wonder and awe and fun and frivolity. And I think if we can maintain that inner child that we all have, that we've protected or that has suffered trauma, and bring them out to play, that's the best thing you can do to connect with children. I mean, my nephew, my brother's son, Ben, he was right into gaming, and he spent a lot of time in his room when he was young. He was a very quiet, reserved child. He was a very picky eater, and we'd recognise some of those traits on the autism spectrum with the way kids aren't necessarily as social. And it wasn't hard to connect with Ben when I recognised what he was interested in, or what he enjoyed telling me about. And so if you can engage and connect with children on their level and meet them where they're at, it's amazing the relationship that opens from there. So as soon as I got interested in the game he was playing, for instance, and he was showing me, and I'm like, holy, like, wow, I've never seen graphics like that. That's amazing. And from my perspective of imagery and, cinematography and all of those things I was into, I could see how amazing this game was, and thought, wow, for a child, experiencing that virtual reality effect, that must be what draws him in and keeps him entertained. But once we had that, he would then sit with me and we'd talk and he'd share stories. And when he went to school, he had a media thing to do, and I just happened to be in Brisbane, and he was working on this project. And because he knew I had a media background and I was still in media at the time, he came to me and he's like, oh, Auntie Kim, I was wondering if you could help me with this project. What do you think about this? And what do you think about that? I'm like, great. We built this connection when you were a little boy, but it survives. And every time I see him, we share stories. He's in New York studying acting now and doing phenomenal things with his life. And when he was back on Father's Day, we had the most amazing chat. We just sat there, and he was sharing and building imagery in my mind of where he lives day to day and how far he has to travel from where he's staying to where the art school is. And it was just beautiful to see that I could have that fun with him when he was little, and then later on he trusted me enough and we had that connection to build on, to share the stories about where we're both at right now. And he shows interest in what I'm doing as well.
Yeah. The idea of storytelling, and we often think about storytelling in terms of business, right? But storytelling for me is just a way to connect. And like your brother likes to, maybe embellish some of the stories or whatever. But it's we always think that we need it to get something, or to manipulate a situation. But for me, it's not. It's interwoven into so much that we do, like how we show up, the connections that we want to have, how we want to share who we are. It's interwoven into so much that we do, or who we are. Yeah, I think a lot of people say, oh, I'm not a very good storyteller, but I think we are. I think we kind of, and I've had this conversation with people before. They say that they're not creative, so that anything like storytelling kind of feels like it fits into that bucket that you're not creative. But like, as a kid, we're all creative, aren't we? We all make up stories. We like, whatever it is, or we imagine and we put ourselves into situations. My kids like to make camps, like they've made it in their bunk beds and stuff like that. And I think we all have that. Do you disagree with that? Or but I don't know. Again, I think like the school systems, everything, trying to fit into society norms, etc., kind of push that out of us. And I think actually, if we can keep connecting with that, it's such a great thing, right? And that's a way to communicate and a way to connect. But I don't know, I feel that it's pushed out of us. Do you see that in a different way?
I don't know if you've seen Sir Ken Robinson's TEDx chat from decades ago, but he actually did a TED talk, not a TEDx, a TED talk about, do schools kill creativity? And he was saying, and this is going back, I think 20 years ago he did this chat and nothing's changed. I was horrified actually when I reviewed it just this last week, because I'm going to do a keynote speech boot camp in Brisbane next week. And because I've been on stage my whole life and I've been telling other people's stories, but when you tell your own, and I've done a TEDx, but I knew I could have done that better. I followed the framework. I was encouraged by, the committee who selected me to deliver that TEDx. I was nervous because I'd never really been on stage sharing something personal, so I had to get over that. But there's definitely a craft to telling great stories. Like, I understand how people feel they're not storytellers, but if they actually thought about how they respond to when their wife or their partner says, how was your day, or what happened today, or anything interesting going on, and then you start delivering this, well, you'll never guess, blah 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 blah. So we tell stories every day, and not only to other people, we tell stories about ourselves to ourselves, and that's the danger one, right? Because I've from time to time told myself stories that were confirmed by my experience as a child, for instance, that I wasn't good enough, that nobody would love me or spend time with me, those sorts of things. And they can play on this loop as some sort of program that we're running behind the scenes and not even be aware of it. So mindfully and intentionally, if we think about this type of stories we'd like to share, to have those connections, and that's what my TEDx was all about. It was called Love, Lies and Social Media, and it was about doing that, the power of sharing stories with the intent to connect, because that's one thing I'm very, very passionate about, is connecting with people, especially through conversations. And it's not just telling our story, it's listening and picking up on things other people are saying. And James Kellett talks about being available and having the ability to be open enough to listen, but also hold people in that safe space, so that if they did want to share something with us, you're there. And that's why connection's so important. If you can connect with someone authentically in a human way and make yourself available, you might save someone's life, because you're there listening to capture their story and perhaps provide them a lifeline, that they matter and you see them and they belong. That's a human trait. It's something that makes us different from every species on the planet. None of those other species tell stories. We do, since we were cavemen, pictures on the walls. And most Indigenous cultures throughout the world, here in Australia, we have First Nations people, and their art is phenomenal in the stories that it tells about what their life was like all those thousands of years ago. So as far as storytelling goes, human beings have been doing it for a long, long time. And I think all people need to do is trust that they have something to share, and then figure out how they can say it in a way people will remember it, people will connect with it. And there's definitely structure to that. Like TEDx talks about 3 stages, and you can download that type of information to look at the TEDx structure of how people are trained to deliver those speeches. So it's basically ABC across, and then 1, 2, 3 down, and it's a 9 quad grid that you fill in with these story basics, and then you expand and try to connect each one to the other. So it's like you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's some sort of beginning where something happens, or you go on this journey. It's like the hero's journey, same sort of thing. And then there's this catalyst moment where something shifts, and then you might return home at the end. But there's other components in there as well. So when I talk about storytelling, and I try to help people understand how to tell a great story, particularly in the digital world, because it's an opportunity for us to connect with anybody around the world on that platform, it's about capturing attention. So in media, we learn about headlines, and we learn how to capture someone's attention, because there's so much information out there, and getting people's attention, that's a highly prized commodity. And then I talk about that opportunity to connect, which is your hook, which brings you into the first line of the first paragraph. So from the headline to the first line. And this can be making a statement in a presentation online. It might be a subject line of an email. That's your headline. And then the very first line that pulls people into the story is that first line of the first paragraph, which is your hook. And if those are the most powerful words, if you can capture someone's attention and then pull them into your story and hold them for 10 seconds, you've got them really to the end, if you can keep segueing between those narratives, right? So my thing is capture, connect, the catalyst. So if you're telling a story about something that happened, what's the catalyst thing? What did you take away from it? So the shift, the lesson, the learning that you want to share about whatever happened, and then the opportunity to collaborate. So inviting them to share something similar, asking them, if you're on LinkedIn, for instance, to go through to this link or connect with you, leave a comment, whatever it is you want them to do, listen to my podcast, your show. That's the 4-step structure I've employed to help people understand how you can actually make storytelling useful in everyday life. It doesn't have to be business. It could be your personal life. It could be wanting to get, your partner's attention, your child's attention. How do you use stories and how do you use modulation in your voice to actually create something that really has them glued, like I'm waiting on the next word on the edge of my seat. What's happening?
Yeah, it's I love the idea of that there's a like a structure behind it because I found that very useful. And I know, if you go on LinkedIn, there's endless people trying to sell you a framework of like anything to sell it to you. But I think if you can take who you are or how you think about yourself, and I think that's something we'll dig into in a second, but then you can sort of put it into an order that makes a bit more sense, and it's
Yep.
easier for then you to communicate and resonate with people. And I think the word manipulation comes up a lot in people's minds, like when we think about storytelling. But it's not really about that. It's about connecting, and like you said, we all want to connect. Um, but having some sort of framework to go, I've got all the bits. I'm just putting them in the wrong order. That's why. And that part about that opening and captivating someone from the beginning is really, I think, it's so powerful because I I haven't done anything on stage, but I have this vision that one day that I will be on a stage. I don't know where necessarily that comes from, but I I look at people that I've been interested in, and they don't come in and introduce themselves and say, "Hi, I'm Colin Parsons." They'll go, "Oh, I've got a flat tire or something, or getting here, or I was arrested just before I got here." Some weird thing that will go. You go, "What?" Like, and people show up going, "Oh, this is going to be another weird talk." But you go, "Oh," and that's the weird hook. It can be something odd, and that, I wouldn't suggest keep making up stories, but something that takes people out of their norm and go, oh, okay, because we do live in this almost robotic world where we just think it's the same, and attention, is, like you say, a commodity. But just to snap someone out of that moment where they think they know what you're going to talk about is super powerful in the way that they would remember you. And I think as you were talking about that, I was like, I wonder, is that why I remember you from our conversation so much? And I was like, I wonder if she did that consciously or subconsciously. I don't know.
No, but I do, like, even through this conversation with you, there's things that pop into my mind that they're human. They're things people relate to. I don't hide things, right? I'm authentic because I come across as myself. I mean, I've been sharing stories about my family unbeknownst to them. If they stumble across it, have at it. So it's about being real. If people can identify with you, so it's not really, I mean, the structure to a story is important. It's like the structure to a joke. I mean, if you give the punchline away in the beginning, it's not going to have the same impact, is it? And then I think about Quentin Tarantino, right? He's one of my all-time favorite storytellers because he doesn't do things linearly, right? So stories do not have to be chronological. And when I teach people mastering storytelling or engaging audiences or whatever it is, I use this as an example. Pulp Fiction is one of the most incredible examples of how things don't have to be chronological. And the way that movie opens, it's confusing, and then it's dramatic, and then you're like, what the hell is actually going on here? And so it starts at the end. It's one of the final scenes where they're running out of this restaurant. It's chaotic. There's all this stuff going on. It's like, what's happening? Then they get in this car and things start to unfold. And you've got, the two lead characters in the front seat and some other guy in the back who ends up with his brain splattered all over the rear windscreen. And it's just like, okay, um, there goes a character. It's already something just started. And yeah, so then it rewinds but it jumps around, So I actually started writing a memoir probably about 6 years ago during COVID lockdown, I did a writing course, and with a friend of mine, Susan Pierce. She's amazing. And so it was 8 chapters. We had 8 weeks and we were to draft 8 chapters of a book. I thought, well, that's good, because I've been thinking about this for a long time. And so that was the challenge for me. You know, where do I start? Where do you start a memoir? It doesn't have to start in your childhood. I mean, it's pretty uneventful. What a boring way to start. You know, I was a baby.
Well,
And
well, your childhood and driving at 9, I'd start there.
I might have to revisit that memoir. I haven't published it, so I got all the opportunity in the world. No, it starts with my near-death experience when I was 25 years old. So I had this memory. It was dark, and I'd come back into consciousness, and I could hear these 2 voices, and I didn't recognize them, and I didn't know where I was. And so that's how I start my book. And it's dark. I can hear voices, 2 distinct voices, but I don't know where they're coming from, and I don't know who they are. And then it goes into them talking and what they're talking about. And it turned out it was 2 nurses. One of them was a male nurse, and he was at the foot of my bed. He was closer to me. And he was talking about what they were doing for the weekend. And he was talking about having beer and pizza and watching a movie. And I'm like, oh, beer, pizza. I'd been in a coma for 5 days on a drip, so I hadn't had any food. And I was unaware of all of that. I didn't know where I was. I was in ICU. It was a very quiet place to be. And there was just these 2 distinct voices. But I mean, I could have been in the trunk of a car. I could have been locked in a cellar. You know, for the audience listening or reading those lines, it leaves their imagination to wonder, oh my God, where is she? It's dark. There's voices. She doesn't recognize them. Is she in danger? So that's a way to captivate an audience and to kick a story off from my memoir. That was the catalyst moment that changed my life. You know, I nearly died. I left my body. I have an out-of-body experience that I remembered that I relayed to my mother. And she said, there's no way you could have seen that man in that bed. No way, because there was a small window above my bed. So, you know, these are the things that really do shape us. And my children at the time were 2 and 1. My son was about to turn 2, and my daughter would have been 3 probably. So that was I was a single parent. I'd had my own business. You know, I'd had this major medical episode. I was taken away from my family for 2 months while I was in hospital throughout the various stages of illness and then recovery. So for that was probably one of the most dramatic things that ever happened to me. And I often talk to people about the importance of understanding your mortality. So I was 25. I nearly died. The perspective it gave me on life and the way I've lived since, and believe me, I lived a pretty wild life up until that stage, but the way I've lived since, because it proved to me the way I'd lived prior to that moment was great. Because if I'd died at 25, I'd had 2 children, I'd been married, separated, I'd lived in 4 or 5 cities, I'd traveled extensively, I was 25 years old, you know, I'd been driving since the age of 9, all of those things. And I think, wow, what a fool. Like, I know people that have never set foot out of their hometown who haven't done half the things I've, you know, had a crack at. Bungee jumping, you know, plunging off bridges into open water, all sorts of things that most people wouldn't even attempt. And I thought, well, if I'd have died at 25, I think I'd done pretty well. So here I am now at 58, and I have the benefit of having experienced something that could have actually been detrimental, like to my children, my family. I would have left behind a major gaping hole in their lives. So, you know, and then weighing up anything my children did after that, they were raised on the principle that if you tell me the truth, it doesn't matter what you do, I will work with you and we'll get through this. Like, there's nothing you can do that will make me ever love you less, right? And so, and the truth was always important. And it was weighed up against the fact that the worst thing that can happen is you die. Somebody dies, you lose that person. So anything, you can break something, steal something, you know, hurt someone, we'll get through it, you know, unless you're taking someone's life. And even then I'm going to stand by you, because obviously something really went wrong. But yeah, I mean, I can't really think of anything more important in life than being connected to another human being. They keep saying no one will remember what you did. No one will remember what you said. What they will remember is how you make them feel. And so this is why, we need to remember the way we treat people and the stories we tell ourselves and others has an impact on everyone around us.
On that point, it's quite interesting because you were saying that you know people that haven't left the town that they grew up in.
Mm.
Um, I say this because I was the complete opposite of you. I sought comfort in being in the same town. Excuse me. Where I grew up, I thought I was going to marry someone, within a 10-meter radius of me. I didn't know who that person was. I just thought that's how it was. And I made a decision through circumstances to move to Luxembourg, and it it wasn't easy. I wasn't that type of person. I had many challenges, but it's one of those events in my life that I'm hugely grateful for because it shaped and it showed me that I was capable of a lot more. um, and I was thinking, like, as you were saying about the people that you know that have not moved out or they haven't done these things. Then I was thinking about you bungee jumping because I can absolutely see it happening. It's like there's zero. I don't even need to imagine. It's just there. Well, of course, why would she not be bungee jumping? um, but the word fear comes into my mind. And do you think that's, and I don't think you're fearless.
No,
I think maybe you just have a different relationship with fear. How does that play out in your mind?
I don't know. I've always been a risk taker. Maybe it's a death wish. I have no idea. It's something that I love the adrenaline. I think, and it's not even an addiction thing. Like, I just love feeling alive. And I think that if you can push yourself to a limit and still survive, then you've reached another level in some way. I said to my husband in my 40s, oh, I've always wanted to jump out of a plane, like with a chute, like not stupid, but I've always wanted to parachute. And I love the skydiving. I think it's phenomenal. And yeah, people have died, even with an instructor. But I never ever think that that's going to happen to me for some reason. Like, no, that's not how I'm going. So I said to him, yeah, I'm going to do that for my 50th because I want to remember my 50th. I'm into experiences, right? I mean, I give experiences more than I give gifts because the last thing people need is another vase or another plate set or whatever things that we gather in life. But experiences, if you give someone an experience, they'll remember that, especially if it's a milestone birthday or whatever. But I do it regardless. And so I've said to my family years ago, look, I don't want any more stuff. Just buy me an experience. So I think my husband must have been out of ideas because I'd told him I wanted to do it when I was 50. He couldn't wait. So when I turned 48, he drove me up to Airlie Beach, put me in a plane, threw me out over the Whitsundays. Beautiful scenery. I mean, it was over in seconds. He put me back in the car and drove me home. I'm like, what? No dinner? No, thank you. Whatever. It
No
was
romance.
crazy. That's it. I got a video out of it. And it was so confronting because as much as I've wanted to do it, and I was pumped, I was jumping around. I mean, there's a video of me, I look like Rocky on the top of the steps. And we got up there into the sky and I'm strapped to this burly bloke. And I'm in front of him, right? And he's pushing me towards the edge. Like, we're scooting along like cats with worms. And we get to the edge. And he's grabbed hold of the things. And he's like, right, you ready? And I'm like, not really. And he goes, push. And as soon as we went out of the plane, you're head first, right? I don't know whether because your head's like a bowling ball and it's heavy, but you're plummeting head first towards the earth. So I'm screaming, like just mouth open. And there's a video of this. It's hilarious. And my cheeks are doing, the old lady stuff. And I've got these goggles on. It was horrible, absolutely horrible. But anyway, after about a minute of screaming, it felt like longer. I just all of a sudden went, oh my God, look at me. That is beautiful. And all of a sudden, all of that fear and all of that disorientation was gone. And when he opened the chute, you can get the control. So you get to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And it was the most amazing experience I've ever had. And I'm like, yeah, I'll do that again. But I haven't yet. But that's the sort of thing, like if you can, and I'll never forget that. Like, I can tell you word for word exactly what happened that day and how we were sitting on the edge and how I remember that feeling. And it makes your heart race and you just feel more alive, than you ever have before. So I don't know what's next, but my 60th is coming up, so I'll keep you notified.
I'm thinking you need to go higher, so then I was thinking space is maybe your next adventure.
Lovely.
Um, it actually brings me on to something that keeps playing into my mind about how we often don't think that we're interesting. Now, I think there's different levels of interesting. I think you are next level, but how we see ourselves often is maybe not in the best terms. And so I mean, I've spent a long time not really thinking I'm very interesting. That's not, that's just generally how I thought. I'm just very average. But um, people do find me interesting. They like to connect. They like to talk about stuff. And I find it weird when people want to know what I'm doing or how I've done it. And I'm like, eh? Like, why would I be interesting? I think we're all interesting. And
Mm.
I love so when I started these conversations, the whole idea was really to talk about people and business. And because I thought I was good at asking questions, what I'm actually interested in most of the time is the person. And so oftentimes people think that they're going to come and they're going to talk about, their job or something like that. But I'm actually interested in the person behind because I find people super interesting. Even if you think that your life's been boring. For me, it's not because there's often stuff in there, but the way that we look at ourselves or the way that we view ourselves is just through our eyes. And because again, I think you're an outlier because I think you actively seek to do these experiences, etc. But we can be very interesting. It's just it's been our life, so we just think it's boring, so it's not interesting. And a lot of people that come on these lives and have these conversations, and I don't necessarily, again, I'm not doing it in a way that I'm trying to do. I'm interested in people, and they'll say something. I'm like, oh, what's that? And they're like, yeah, yeah. And but it just, I think it's a message really for everybody and anybody. We are interesting, just, okay, yeah, I'm very routine. Okay, but why are you routine? Oh, because of this, like,
Mm.
what something happened in my childhood or something like that. It doesn't need to be a trauma. It doesn't need to be something, but we all have this stuff. And I think when it comes to storytelling, because we don't think that we're very interesting, we play it small and go, oh, well, I'm not very interesting. And I think if you can get over those two things, the first one is actually we're all interesting, and the audience that we relate to will maybe be different.
Yep.
But second, just that formula, that framework, that way of presenting that, you've
Mm.
if you can just learn what you've just explained about how that framework works, you're off to the races. You've got it all to start with, right? And you can start taking your experience, looking at them, and maybe reframing how you see yourself, and then yeah, start engaging with people. And I think that will bring a lot of joy to people because you go, oh, I'm quite shy and stuff like that. And I am. I don't really like the term shy. You just, it, I don't. Anyone can correct me if they see it differently, but I think shyness is more about the people around you. You don't feel comfortable enough to talk, and it might be because there's a lot of extroverted people or loud, or you're not feeling comfortable. But often, when I've seen people that have said they're shy, if you follow them into their natural environment, that they're surrounded by two or three people that love them, trust them, or whatever, they come alive, and you're like, but
Mm.
you're not shy. Then it's a story that you're telling yourself to give a reason why you don't, in a meeting stand up, or that you're not on stage. And I think we
Yep.
have this misconception of who we are, how we're supposed to show up in the world, how different people view us, and how okay, I've got to be an extrovert, so an extrovert means that every moment of every minute of every day, I need to be outgoing. No, you can just be extroverted in certain situations, etc. So I think misunderstood a lot about ourselves, and we project to what the society norms should be. If we can overcome that, I think that's a great start for
Yeah.
entering into that world of storytelling, and layered on top, learning, just because maybe you've missed out on thinking that you weren't interesting, you haven't gone into that depth of understanding what what's the formula to telling a good story. And I think that would be a great place to start, right?
It's interesting that you say that. Like, I love these conversations you have. I listened to a couple with people I've actually met, James and his lovely friend. I can't remember her name right now. You spoke with
Sally.
her. Yes.
Yeah.
But like, I love the way it's in. I've listened to another couple that I didn't know the people either, but I love the way it's just a raw, authentic. Like, nothing's planned. You follow this pathway of where the conversation naturally flows, and that helps people feel comfortable as well. And I'm very similar in my approach on my podcast, where I just tell people, okay, this is the format, have a listen to some of the previous episodes, but I want to delve into who created you, how did you get to be who you are now, what were the influences, some of the catalyst moments, and then we can talk about who you are today, how you show up for your children, if you don't have children, why'd you make those decisions, that sort of thing. So those conversations are the ones that we have with people we meet at a party, catching up with friends. They're the real conversations, and I think you do them really well because you are sharing as well. It's not an interview style, it's a natural flowing conversation where we both contribute to components, and then we show interest in the other person. I mean, there's so many questions I wanted to ask you, but it's your show, so I just and I got a chance to ask some of those questions when we had our pre-chat. But I am so, I suppose, it's almost like proud of you, the way you're conducting yourself within what you're doing in Luxembourg, because you have your girls, but you have your own life, and there's a separation that's gone on, and I get that because I was a single parent to my children for all of their life, because you're always a single parent. But I had my partner; he just didn't want to be a parent, and that's his prerogative. And this is the beauty of being an adult. We get the opportunity to make those choices, right? So I would love to the message I'd like to leave people with in relation to storytelling is that it is all about feeling comfortable, but that's up to you. You choose when you're comfortable. You choose how you want to show up, So there are ways people can even help themselves feel more relaxed, not so anxious or fearful in certain situations where there's new people. What you were talking about before is where people feel comfortable with people they know. And this is where you see their authentic selves come out because they feel safe. And so I've seen people who are introverts be the most amazing speakers, presenters, on television. Not everyone in media is an extrovert. And thank goodness, because if it was all extroverts, I wouldn't have wanted to be there. Like, that's just too competitive. Wow. So there's plenty of room, Colin, for
Yeah.
plenty of personalities, and everyone has a story to tell. It's just how you tell it. And I always say to people, if you've got a story, find what's the most interesting component of it, and then allude to that at the front, because people are going to wait to find out how you get there. So that's what capturing attention is all about. It's finding the interesting point and setting it up somewhere in the beginning with just a hint of what you're going to be talking about.
Yeah. I believe honesty is one of those things. So I'm quite into comedy, and I
Love it.
think comedy is such a great art form. And I think where comedy that really lands for me is that honesty. It's that thing that we think but we don't say, in our day to day life. And you know, I'm thinking about killing my kids. Like it's on that verge of, oh, what, that's wrong. But you can also relate, because I'm sure, like, you've had a day where everything's gone wrong and you're thinking about killing your kids. It's a bad example, or maybe a good one. But it's this ability to
Relatable.
connect. Yeah, there we go. But that ability to tap into almost that feeling or that thought that you're thinking, but you don't speak out publicly, that is very relatable. And I think with social media and stuff like that, you're constantly bombarded with all of these images, stories of everything going well. Yeah, you know, from rags to riches, all of this thing. But uh, I've signed up for that, and I thought it was all great. But I'm actually interested in all the people in between, the people
Mm,
that are on their journey, the people that don't want to do that journey, the people that think that they're not interesting but truly are, that just would just need a little bit of support just to sort of maybe come out on camera and just talk about something. And some of the most outstanding conversations I've ever had are with people that were nervous before coming on camera. They they took a chance on me, I think, because they felt safe, and
mm,
I created an environment, but they came alive, and I'm like, wow. And I think that then allows them to see themselves slightly different, and
yes.
that gives them the confidence to maybe try something else. And I've seen that
That,
message come across a few times, and I think that's so amazing because we live in this world of very extremes. Okay, and I'm very much into the people in between because I think there's so much beauty and um, curiosity for me to explore that and to understand. And I think, like you said, all the extroverted, introverted. Well, no, but we don't need to be those extremes. We can be just someone that wants to do something and just waiting for the right person to ask the right question at the right time to share that. And I get to do that, so I feel very fortunate enough to do that. And I seem to have landed um, a nice audience that seem to resonate with that, and are very happy for me to do it and to continue to do it. And but I think that's the kind of message that I'm trying to get across. I know I'm meandering around, but we are interesting. There is a lot more to us, and if we think that we're not interesting, they're the people that are interesting. And just come and have a conversation, or just find a way just to get past maybe that negative self-belief of what you are, and just try it. And it doesn't have to be jumping out of an aeroplane to be interesting. Like just come and share your story. So yeah, I think it's I'd like people just to feel that they were a bit more interesting. I've become more interesting because I've had these conversations. That genuinely, that's how I see myself. People want to know my knowledge, or want to know how things have happened, or who I connected with. So you can create being interesting as well. And it doesn't need to be this false image. It can just be through genuine connections with people.
you're more interesting because you have other stories to share as well. Like I'm sure when you're connecting with people or talking, like I've mentioned a few people I've spoken with or that have stuck with me in this conversation, so having those conversations and hearing other people's story by default creates more stories for you to share with people as well. And you'll find over the years that are to come, people will be talking to you about a subject and you'll be like, oh, you might find this helpful because I spoke with this person, this happened to them, and that's how, they might have taken this path, or they found a way via, this. So the whole thing about stories is helping people feel like they're not alone, that they belong, but they also are not alone in their struggles or their challenges or their triumphs. It's a human thing. And that's what I love so much about connecting with people like you and sharing stories and, yeah, learning about other people's lives. And I know we're going to stay in touch.
Yeah, for
That's just
sure.
it. Whether you want to or not, Colin, I'm in your
Yeah,
life now.
yeah. I'll be looking out over the field behind. There'll be a plane going past, and there'll be someone jumping out, going, "Woo! I'm here, Colin. I'm here." I'll be like, "Oh God, here's Kim showboating."
I've arrived at people's places in other ways as well, jet skiing, all sorts of things. So
Does not surprise me one little bit. One little bit. Um, I don't know that there's going to be a better way to end this conversation than that image of you just rocking up at my place. But um, I, I'm so grateful that we met, and obviously, James is one of those people that we've obviously connected to, and Sally. And I realised that the world is becoming a smaller place for me, which is really great because I would never have had the opportunity to meet someone. Australia is on my bucket list of places to come, but the reality of you and me crossing paths in any other way would probably be very low. And I'm so grateful that I got to meet you. You've stuck in my mind. You've brought so much wisdom, but you've brought joy. And that is something that's amazing because you, when I think about you, I just think of this smiling person and someone that just comes alive. You are authentically yourself. And I love that because I think that allows me to be more authentically myself. And even from the last conversation we had and today, I will walk away from this feeling very grateful. And when I think about you, I'm going to have a smile on my face. And that makes my day really great. So for that, thank you very much.
Thank you. And that little colourful windmill, that just makes my day as well. I mean, you make me smile. And so does James. You have a bed here in Australia, so let me know when you're coming and I'll make sure the guest room is ready for you.
Nice. I was thinking about doing a world tour one day to actually physically meet all the people that I've had. So on the conversation, so I'm like, okay, I think I might need about a year to come and visit all these places, but you're definitely on that list for sure, 100%.
Thank you, mate. You have a good night.
Yeah, just for people that want to connect with you, where should people find you? Is there a website, LinkedIn? Yep. That's where we found each other. Where's the best place?
Yes, I love LinkedIn. So connect with me there if you're on LinkedIn. Would love to have a chat, maybe a bit of a Zoom session. We can facilitate that. But my name, kimkleidon.com, is easy as that. So that's where you'll find my website. If you just punch me into a search engine, that name, there's heaps of stuff that'll come up. There's some transcripts with politicians, and I had a media career, so I'm easy to find.
Is the video of you jumping out of this helicopter on there? Why don't you stick that out there? Come on.
Because it's actually one of those proper DVDs, like a CD. I don't even know how I'd get it onto a computer anymore. I don't have anything. I don't have a drive.
You've got grandkids. Come on, they'll do that in 5 minutes for you. Come on.
We don't have a CD player. Like nobody has a DVD player anymore that connects to a computer. Like who has one of those?
No. Yeah. But come on, there's a way. I need to see that on the internet for sure.
I'll send it to you and you can do it. How's that?
All right. Yeah, it feels a bit heavy lifting my side, but that's fine.
Thank you.
Amazing. No, thanks, Kim. And yeah, we'll stay in contact for sure. Amazing.
Great. Can't wait. We need to have another chat again soon. Anyway, I was thinking maybe I should interview you about your parenting experience for my podcast. So if you're up for that.
Yeah, 100%. I'm actually, people started asking me to be on their podcast, which I'm very grateful for. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All the wrong turns that I've made in parenting, I'm absolutely happy to share.
You're not alone there, mate. You're not alone. I mean, and you talk about me bringing you joy and smiling. A couple of days ago, I was crying all day. So, it depends on the day you get people, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm glad I got today. I got happy, Kim.
Thanks, mate. You take care.
Yeah, you too. Bye, Kim.